Hey, you. Ever feel like you're just constantly busy, but not really getting anything meaningful done?
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, in today's deep dive, we're going to try to tackle that feeling head on.
Chins did.
We're going to crack open Cal Newport's Deep Work.
Okay.
It's a book that argues that the ability to truly focus is becoming not just rare, but like a superpower in our distracted world.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating shift in thinking. We're so often told to be constantly connected, to be a multitasker.
Right.
But Newport makes a really compelling case that those things are actually holding us back from doing our best work.
Okay, so let's break down what exactly Newport means by deep work. Is it just like sitting at your desk for hours on end, even if you're just staring blankly at a spreadsheet?
Well, not quite. Deep work is about intentionally directing your attention towards cognitively demanding tasks.
Mm-hmm.
It's that state of flow where you're fully immersed, like when you're coding a complex program or writing a captivating chapter or analyzing a scientific study. It's where those real breakthroughs happen. But it's becoming harder and harder to access in a world of constant notifications and distractions.
So how is deep work different from all of the other stuff we do each day? Like checking emails, attending meetings, scrolling through social media, what Newport calls shallow work.
Yeah, shallow work. Well, shallow work is often necessary, of course, but it can so easily become a trap.
How so?
Well, it keeps us busy, but it doesn't actually move the needle on the important stuff. And it plays into what Newport calls the principle of least resistance,
Okay.
which is basically our brain's tendency to gravitate towards the easiest task in the moment, even if it's not the most productive.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. It's just so easy to get sucked into the vortex of emails and social media, and then suddenly it's 5 p.m. You're like, wait, where did the day go?
Exactly. And that's why Newport really stresses the importance of prioritizing deep work. He even provides some pretty compelling examples of people who have achieved some incredible things by structuring their lives around deep work.
Okay, so give me some of those examples. Who are these deep work ninjas, and how do they actually make it work?
Well, one example is Rick Furr. He's a master swordsmith.
Wow.
And he spends hours in deep concentration crafting these intricate swords.
I can imagine.
His work requires such intense focus that even a small lapse in concentration can ruin hours of effort. But he finds immense satisfaction in the challenge and the craftsmanship of his work.
That's such a cool example. It reminds me of that old-fashioned notion of taking pride in your work and honing your skills and creating something truly remarkable.
Absolutely. And Newport argues that the same sense of craftsmanship can be applied to knowledge work, too. It's about approaching our work with intention and focus, even if it's not as physically demanding as swordsmithing.
So how do we translate that swordsmith's focus into our own lives? Is there like a one-size-fits-all approach to integrating deep work?
Not really. Newport actually outlines 4 distinct philosophies for integrating deep work into your life.
Okay.
The first is called the monastic approach.
Monastic approach.
Yeah. And it's all about eliminating shallow obligations to maximize time for deep work.
So I'm picturing like a writer who goes off the grid to focus solely on writing.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's for like the extreme deep divers. What about those of us who can't just drop everything and become hermits?
Well, there's the bimodal philosophy.
Bimodal.
Yeah. And this one involves alternating between periods of intense deep work and periods of more shallow activities. So a good example might be like a professor who stacks teaching commitments into one semester, leaving the other semester free for focused research and writing.
So it's like strategically planning these deep work sprints in your schedule.
Precisely. Then there's the rhythmic philosophy.
Okay.
And this one's all about establishing a regular deep work routine, making it a habit, like going to the gym. Imagine, for example, a writer who commits to writing for 2 hours every morning before checking email or social media.
Okay, so consistency is key here. But what about those of us with more unpredictable schedules?
That's where the journalistic philosophy comes in. It's about seizing opportunities for deep work whenever they arise, even if it's just for, 20 minutes here, an hour there. It's about being flexible and opportunistic with your focus.
That's a relief. So it sounds like there's a deep work approach out there for everyone, no matter their personality or their profession.
Yeah.
But even knowing that there are all these different philosophies, I'm still wondering, how do we actually make time for deep work in our already busy lives?
Right. Well, one of the most powerful tools Newport suggests is ritualizing your deep work.
Ritualizing.
Yeah. It's about creating specific behaviors that signal to your brain, okay, it's time to focus now.
Like a pre-game routine for your mind.
Exactly. Think of it as having a dedicated workspace, or listening to specific music, or even having a particular drink while you work. These little rituals can make a huge difference in helping you get into the zone.
I can see that. It's like creating a mental trigger for deep work. But rituals aside, what about those bigger, like external forces? They constantly try to derail our focus, like the endless stream of notifications and the allure of social media.
Right. Well, that's where Newport's idea of grand gestures comes in. It's about taking these bold steps to demonstrate your commitment to deep work.
Okay, so give me an example. What does a grand gesture for deep work actually look like?
Well, think of writers who go on these extended retreats to remote locations to focus solely on their work. It's a dramatic action that says nothing is more important right now than this project. Or remember the example of J.K. Rowling checking into a luxurious hotel to finish the last Harry Potter book.
Right.
That was a grand gesture. It was about creating this distraction-free environment and making a statement about the importance of her work.
I love that. But for those of us who aren't best-selling authors, are there any less dramatic grand gestures we can make?
Absolutely. It could be as simple as, turning off your phone and internet for a few hours each day, or establishing a rule that you don't check email after a certain time. It's about sending a signal to yourself and others that you're serious about protecting your time and attention.
This is making me rethink my entire approach to work. But I'm still curious. What about collaboration? Can we really achieve deep work when we're working on projects with others?
That's a great question. And it leads us to another fascinating point. Deep work doesn't actually have to be solitary. Collaboration can actually enhance deep work, but it requires a strategic approach.
Okay, so it's not a case of deep work or collaboration. It's about finding a way to make them work together.
Exactly. Newport suggests this hub-and-spoke model, where you have hubs like meetings or brainstorming sessions for exchanging ideas and defining problems.
Okay.
But then individuals retreat to their spokes, their own focused workspaces, to go deep and develop those ideas further.
So it's like having dedicated time for both interaction and concentration, knowing when to switch between the two modes.
Precisely. It's about being intentional about how you collaborate, making sure it fuels your deep work rather than distracting from it.
This is all incredibly insightful. But let's be honest, deep work sounds challenging. Does that mean we're all just doomed to struggle with distractions forever?
Not at all. One of the most empowering things about Newport's book is that he doesn't just tell us why deep work is important, he also gives us these practical strategies for actually getting better at it.
All right, so let's talk about those strategies. What are some of the things we can do to train our brains for deep work? Just like we would train for a marathon.
Well, one technique he recommends is called productive meditation.
Productive meditation.
Yeah. It's about using downtime, like, say, walking or showering, to actively focus on a specific problem you're working on.
So instead of letting your mind just wander, you're intentionally directing your attention towards a specific challenge.
Exactly. It's a way to kind of squeeze in deep thinking, even when you're not at your desk.
I love that. It's like a mental workout for your brain.
Yeah.
What are some other techniques we can use to strengthen those focus muscles?
Another strategy is to engage in memory training exercises.
Okay.
Newport specifically recommends learning how to memorize a shuffled deck of cards.
Okay, I have to admit that sounds a little random.
Yeah.
How does memorizing cards help with deep work?
Well, the process of memorizing cards involves creating these vivid mental images and associating them with specific locations. This requires intense focus and attention to detail, skills that are directly transferable to deep work.
So it's like boot camp for your attention span.
Precisely. It's about pushing your cognitive limits and building up your ability to concentrate, even when it's challenging.
It's all so fascinating. It's like we're discovering the hidden potential of our own minds. But let's be real, distractions are everywhere. How do we actually deal with them in a practical way?
Right. Well, one of the biggest culprits of distraction in the modern world is our constant connection to the internet.
Oh, you're telling me it's like this never-ending stream of information and entertainment all vying for our attention.
Exactly. And that's why Newport offers some practical strategies for managing our relationship with technology. One of the most effective is the idea of scheduled internet blocks.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are scheduled internet blocks and how do they work?
So it's about being intentional about when and how you engage with the online world.
Okay.
So you designate specific times during the day for checking email, browsing social media, or catching up on news. Outside those blocks, you're completely offline. No notifications, no temptations.
So it's about reclaiming control over our digital lives, not letting the internet dictate our every move.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of how we're spending our time and attention, not letting technology hijack our focus.
This makes so much sense. But knowing when to go offline is only half the battle. What about deciding what to actually do during those offline blocks? How do we choose the tasks that will truly move the needle on our goals?
That's where another key principle comes in. Identifying the 20% of activities that produce 80% of your success. It's about ruthlessly eliminating shallow work that doesn't contribute to your most important goals.
The Pareto principle in action. It's all about focusing on what truly matters and letting go of the rest.
Exactly. And to figure out that 20%, it's crucial to get very clear on your goals and what activities actually contribute to them.
This is so empowering. It's about taking ownership of our schedules and not letting the endless stream of distractions run our lives. But even with all these strategies in our toolkit, it still feels daunting to actually implement them.
I understand. It can feel overwhelming to change our habits and break free from the constant pull of distractions. But the key is to start small and build momentum.
Okay, I like that. Starting small. But where do we go from there? What's a good first step for someone who's ready to dive into the world of deep work?
I think one of the most practical and impactful first steps is to simply track your time.
You mean like actually writing down everything I do throughout the day? Isn't that a little tedious?
It might feel that way at first, but trust me, it's eye-opening.
Okay.
It helps you see where your time is actually going and makes you more aware of how much time you're wasting on shallow activities.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. But just tracking time isn't going to magically make me a deep work master, right? What's the next step after we have a better understanding of where our time is going?
That's where the magic of scheduling comes in. It might seem kind of counterintuitive, but one of the most effective ways to actually make time for deep work is to schedule every minute of your workday.
Whoa, every single minute. That sounds incredibly intense. Do you ever find it, like, too restrictive?
It definitely takes some discipline, but the payoff can be huge.
Okay.
When you plan your day in advance, you're making a conscious decision about how you want to spend your time, rather than just reacting to whatever comes your way.
So it's about being proactive with your time instead of constantly playing defense against distractions.
Exactly. And when you have a clear plan for your day, it's much easier to, say no to those last-minute requests and distractions that inevitably pop up.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like setting boundaries around your time and attention. I like it.
It can be a game changer, and it goes beyond email, too. Think about setting specific hours when you're available for meetings or phone calls. The key is to communicate those boundaries clearly and stick to them as much as possible.
So we're reclaiming control over our schedules, not letting other people dictate how we spend our time. That's a powerful shift in thinking.
Absolutely. And speaking of reclaiming control, Newport also suggests a pretty bold strategy for managing email.
Oh.
Don't respond.
Wait, really? Just ignore those messages entirely. I'm not sure my boss would be too happy about that.
Of course, it's not about ignoring every message. But his point is that our default response to email should be not to respond, unless there's a clear reason to do so.
So it's about being more intentional with our communication, not feeling pressured to reply to every message that hits our inbox.
Precisely. He actually outlines 3 criteria for when it's okay to ignore an email. If it's ambiguous, if it doesn't interest you, or if nothing good would come from responding.
Yeah, that's a great guideline. It takes the pressure off feeling like we have to be constantly on and responding to every ping. It sounds like Newport's whole approach to email is about maximizing its value while minimizing its drain on our time and attention.
Exactly. He even encourages people to experiment with, like batching their email, checking it only a few times a day instead of constantly monitoring their inbox. It frees up so much mental energy for deep work.
This has given me so many ideas for how to streamline my workflow. But even if we get a handle on email, there's still this massive elephant in the room when it comes to distractions.
Yeah.
Social media.
You're absolutely right. Social media is designed to be addictive. And it can be a major obstacle to deep work.
It's just like this constant tug on our attention, pulling us away from the work that truly matters.
Exactly. And that's why Newport suggests this radical experiment. Quit social media for 30 days.
Whoa, 30 days. That sounds pretty drastic.
It might sound extreme, but Newport argues that it's the best way to truly assess the role of social media in your life.
Okay.
He even suggests having a packing party.
A packing party?
Yeah, where you metaphorically pack up all your social media accounts as if you're going on a trip.
I like that. So it's about creating a clean break,
Yeah.
giving yourself a chance to experience life without that constant barrage of notifications and updates.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that many people who try this experiment realize they don't actually miss social media that much,
Hmm.
and they discover they have more time and energy for the things that truly matter.
I'm starting to feel inspired to try this myself. But social media isn't just a distraction during the workday. It can also kind of creep into our evenings and weekends, preventing us from truly disconnecting and recharging.
You've hit on a crucial point. Our ability to do deep work isn't just about what we do during the workday. It's also about how we manage our downtime.
So we can't just, power through 8 hours of deep work and then collapse on the couch for the rest of the night, scrolling through our phones until we fall asleep.
That's not exactly a recipe for sustainable focus. Newport actually draws inspiration from Arnold Bennett, a British writer from the early 20th century.
Okay.
And he proposed this fascinating idea: treat your evenings like a day within a day.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this day within a day concept.
So Bennett believed that most people waste their evenings, seeing them as just like leftover time after the workday.
Right.
He argued that we should be more intentional with those hours, treating them as a separate day, filled with opportunities for self-improvement and meaningful activities.
So it's about having a plan for our leisure time, not just passively consuming entertainment.
Exactly. Bennett was a big advocate for reading great literature and poetry during those evening hours, but the principle applies to any activity that you find truly engaging and enriching.
So it's about having a mini mission for your evening, something to look forward to that's completely separate from work.
Exactly. And this intentional approach to downtime can actually make you more productive the next day. It's about giving your mind a chance to recharge and your subconscious to process the challenges of the day.
It sounds like we're talking about more than just relaxation, but about using our leisure time to nourish our minds and spirits.
Precisely. And speaking of ending the workday on a positive note, Newport also advocates for a strategy he calls fixed schedule productivity.
Fixed schedule productivity. I think we touched on this a little earlier, right?
Yes, it's the idea of setting a firm end time to your workday and then working backward to figure out how to get everything done within those constraints.
So it's about creating a deadline for yourself, a clear boundary between work time and personal time.
Exactly. And the scarcity mindset can actually make you much more efficient with your time. When you know you only have a limited amount of time to work, you're less likely to waste time on shallow activities that don't contribute to your most important goals.
It sounds counterintuitive,
Mm-hmm.
but I can see how that would work. If you know you have to leave the office at 5 p.m., you're going to be laser focused on getting the most important things done.
Precisely. And Newport points to the example of Jason Fried. He's the co-founder of Basecamp.
Right.
And he implemented a 4-day work week for his company. But the key was that it wasn't about cramming 40 hours of work into 4 days. It was about doing less work, eliminating shallow tasks, and focusing on the deep work that truly mattered.
That's so smart. So it's not about working longer, it's about working smarter and focusing on what truly moves the needle.
Yeah.
But even when we try to prioritize, there's always that temptation to multitask, to try to juggle multiple things at once. Is there any hope for us chronic multitaskers?
Well, the research is pretty clear on this one. Multitasking is a myth.
Really?
Our brains simply aren't wired to focus on multiple things simultaneously. What we call multitasking is actually just rapid task switching, and it comes with a hefty cognitive cost.
So all those years I spent bragging about my multitasking skills were basically a lie.
Well, you aren't alone in believing that myth, but the good news is that we can retrain our brains to focus on one thing at a time. It's about being more deliberate with our attention and resisting the urge to constantly switch between tasks.
So we're talking about a complete rewiring of our mental habits. Where do we even begin?
One powerful strategy is to practice what Newport calls attention residue.
Attention residue.
Yeah, it's the idea that when we switch from one task to another, a bit of our attention remains stuck on the previous task, reducing our focus on the current task.
So it's like our brains are still trying to process the previous task, even though we've moved on to something new.
Exactly. And this residue kind of accumulates throughout the day, leaving us feeling scattered and mentally exhausted. That's why it's so crucial to create those blocks of uninterrupted time for deep work, where we can fully immerse ourselves in a single task without the constant switching.
This is making me rethink my entire approach to work. I'm already feeling inspired to, create more space for deep work in my life.
That's fantastic. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making small changes over time and gradually building those deep work muscles.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm feeling energized and ready to tackle my work with a newfound focus.
I'm so glad to hear that. And as we wrap up our deep dive into Cal Newport's deep work, I'd love to leave you with a final thought. Deep work is not just about being more productive. It's about living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about bringing our full attention and intention to everything we do, not just our work. But before we let you go, we have one last question for you to ponder. As you embark on your deep work journey, what's one thing you can do today to create more space for deep work in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question to consider. It could be as simple as, scheduling a 30-minute block on your calendar for focused work, or turning off your phone for an hour in the evening.
Or maybe even declaring like a social media-free weekend.
Exactly. The point is to just start small and experiment with different strategies to find what works best for you.
It's about making those small but significant shifts in our habits and mindsets.
Precisely. And the more you practice deep work, the more you'll discover its transformative power. Not just in terms of your productivity, but in terms of your overall well-being.
It's about reclaiming our attention, our focus, and ultimately our lives.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into deep work. We hope it's inspired you to embrace the power of focus and create something truly meaningful with your time and attention.
You've given us so much to think about. We'll be pondering these ideas long after this deep dive ends.
I hope so. Deep work is a journey, not a destination. So keep experimenting, keep practicing, and keep pushing yourself to reach new levels of focus and creativity.
And remember, even small steps can lead to big changes. So start today and see what amazing things you can achieve when you harness the power of deep work.
Thanks for listening.